Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Chee-Tash. My name is Chris. Today we're going over 1984, Chapter 3, Part 5, Oh So Close to Being Done. This is the second to last part of George Orwell's book, 1984, and this was a very short one. Very, very short one, just a few pages, but something important happens in these 5 pages that I think let's just jump it right into it right now. We still see Winston at the Ministry of Love. He's been moving all over the building, and it's stated on page 293 that he can kind of tell based on the slight differences in the air pressure where he is in the building. And again, the building is windowless, where there is no darkness. There's always lights on. So he says that Winston is saying that the cells where the guards had beaten him were below the ground level. And then the room in which O'Brien interrogated him was high up closer to the roof. Just like a little bit of a detail there. Seems like the place is pretty big. The place was many meters underground, as deep down as it was possible to go. So just a little bit of a minor detail of what we're dealing with here. Winston is still in the Ministry of Love. He's still undergoing his the 3 phases. And it seems like he's about to hit the last phase here with what we're about to get into. Because as he's still here in the Ministry of Love, O'Brien enters his chamber, or where he is currently housed in. And O'Brien comes in and says, "Hey, Winston, you remember you asked me one time what was in room 101? And I told you that you already knew the answer. Everyone knows it. The thing that is in room 101 is the worst thing in the world." Very interesting. And I almost kind of thought that Winston was already in room 101 back when he was undergoing that shock therapy, but I guess not. I guess this is something completely different. And I should have put transitions in here just so I can kind of make a little bit more suspenseful on what's in room 101. But as you can see there, it varies for each individual. And what's the one thing that Winston fears the most? And you could say, yeah, he fears maybe the party and getting caught, all those things. But remember one thing, back when him and Julia were hanging out one day at Sherrington's shop in the room that he rented above Sherrington's shop, and a rat appears. And Julia points it out and kind of shoos it away, and Winston freaks out about it. To Winston, rats are the worst thing in the world. And that's what he is going to be faced with in room 101, is some dirty rats. Some dirty rats. Let's go to the next slide. And if you guys remember, it kind of reminds me, there's a song by Pearl Jam called Rats. I remember I had a friend, Dave, who would always quote that song by Pearl Jam. So what ends up happening? The door opens, a guard comes in to Winston's chamber, and I'm guessing he's in room 101 right now, maybe. And the guard is carrying something made of wire, a box or a basket of some kind, and he sets it down on the table. And that basket is really just a cage. And the cage has a rat in it. But the cage is interesting in the way it's constructed, is that there's a mask at one end of it, and then the cage on the other end. So it reads on page 294, there was a mask-like attachment in the front of it, and his bowels seem to turn to water. It's almost like Winston understands now the purpose of that mask-like attachment. O'Brien brings up something. O'Brien brings up one of Winston's dreams that he has. And now we're kind of getting a picture of Winston's dreams have really kind of foreshadowed things. If we look back at it, his dreaming about Julia in that field, dreaming about potentially his parents, dreaming about O'Brien and the place of no darkness. And now, do you guys remember there was a dream where Winston had? He wakes up from a nightmare. I think he's with Julia when he wakes up from this dream. He says there's a wall of blackness in front of you and roaring sound in your ears. This is O'Brien telling him, hey, you remember you used to have these dreams. It's crazy how the party just knows all this information, even like what you're dreaming. There was a wall of blackness in front of you and roaring sound in your ears. And O'Brien reveals it was the rats that were on the other side of that wall in his dream. O'Brien goes on, and Winston's right by now is starting to freak out. He's starting to tell O'Brien, hey, this isn't necessary. What is it that you want me to do? Say, I'll do anything. And O'Brien kind of just ignores Winston, and he goes on. And he says, pain is not always enough. There are occasions when a human being will stand out against pain, even to the point of death. But for everyone, there is something unendurable. For Winston, the rats are unendurable. They are a form of pressure that you cannot withstand, even if you wish to. You will do what is required of you. Interesting. O'Brien also makes this point here. Courage and cowardice are not involved. If you are falling from a height, it is not cowardly to clutch at a rope. If you are drowning, it's not cowardly to swim up and fill up your lungs with air. It is merely an instinct which cannot be disobeyed. It is the same with the rats. For you, they are unendurable. So what is going to be required of Winston here? And we'll get into that, I guess, in a second here. Let's go to the next slide, page 296. So like we said, the cage has a mask attached to it. And Winston is going to be in the mask at one end of the cage, and when the door on the other end of the cage slides up, the rat on that side will run to attack Winston's face. And there's a gruesome picture here painted by O'Brien that, hey, sometimes they eat your eyes first, sometimes they eat your cheeks first and go for the tongue. Not a very pleasant image. And this is being played in my head while O'Brien is telling Winston this. And he's telling him how, the rat's going to leap through the air. He can hear the rats on the other end of the cage. He's getting so frightened. O'Brien reminds him how rats have been known to eat children if they're left alone in Oceania. It's just, this suspense it's truly disturbing what could potentially happen. Now, Winston surmises here that the only way for him to survive, because he's freaking out, he's getting sick to his stomach, he's fighting furiously against his panic, but he says there was only one way to save himself. He must interpose another human being, the body of another human being between himself and the rats. And the only person that he can think of to do this is Julia. And I'm trying to see. One body that he could thrust between himself and the rats, and he was shouting frantically over and over. But he had suddenly understood that in the whole world there was just one person to whom he could transfer his punishment to. So it's interesting here he picks Julia, and I think that this was O'Brien's goal for the ultimate submission of Winston to the party, because Winston has already started to think that 2 plus 2 equals 5. We saw this in the previous, in part 4. He's starting to re-educate himself on freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength, war is peace, Big Brother's always watching. 2 plus 2 equals 5. He's starting to relearn this stuff. He's starting to implement Crime Stop into his thinking. He still hates Big Brother, though. He's honest about that with O'Brien in part 4. This is, I think, the last step that O'Brien was referring to is betraying Julia. Remember, Winston and Julia had this pact that they would never betray each other. They would still love each other. But by giving up Julia, interposing her body in between him and the rat, he's essentially, what I think, kind of killing that relationship between him and Julia. And now in his heart, that relationship is going to be replaced with Big Brother. Big Brother should be your one and only true love, even above your kids and your husband, wife in Oceania. Because remember, Winston says, hey, I could hold out. I can think this stuff. I can kind of camouflage my thinking and say the things that the party wants me to say, as long as I can hold the thoughts of rebellion still deep down in my heart. But I think O'Brien knows this, that Winston is trying to do this, and he wants to weed that out of Winston. Weed that out. I think that is the final transformation that Winston must undergo in order to get back to being a faithful party member. So the cage is like about to open, and he screams out frantically, "Do it, not me, Julia. I don't care what you do to her. Tear her face off, strip her to the bones. Not me, not me." Next thing you know, he's kind of having this like out of body experience where he says that he was falling backwards into enormous depths away from the rats. He was still strapped to the chair. O'Brien is still right next to him, but he's like falling through the building, earth, oceans, the atmosphere. He's seeing the stars. There was still the cold touch of a wire against his cheek, but through the darkness that enveloped him, he had heard another metallic click and knew that the cage door had clicked shut and not open. He has successfully betrayed Julia, and now his heart will be filled with the love of Big Brother. And that was the goal that they had all along. And that's where we conclude with part 5. I told you guys this was a really short part. And then we got part 6 as the last part for next week. That's like 10 pages, so that one won't be too bad either. So he did it. The thing that he promised, him and Julia promised that they would never do to each other, he did, and he seemingly betrayed her. Or maybe not betrayed her, but killed that love that he had of Julia. And what Julia kind of represents, like that freedom to do what you want, go frolic in the fields, eat all like the foods that you want, have fun, go against the party. That's gone now. That's gone now because the cage was closed. O'Brien got what he wanted. And we'll see what happens in part 6, the last part of 1984. Thank you guys so much for listening this far. I really appreciate it. Excited? Tune in next time for the last episode on 1984. And we won't have a discussion. No discussion question for this time either. But still check out the blog. I still have plenty of posts on 1984 on there. And guys, thank you very much. My name is Chris. This has been Chee-Tash. Take care.